All right, welcome back, people. It's been forever and a day, and this is going to be Kenter at Your Own Risk, episode number 27, where we discuss the season and series opener for House of the Dragon, Heirs of the Dragon. Before we get started, I just want to do a little shout out, and I hope Kent's okay with this, but we recently lost one of our best friends, Russell Snyder. And I just want to say that, the world hasn't been the same since he's been gone. So, our friend Eric introduced me to Kent back in the day, and Russ was always part of that crew the entire time we were hanging out when we were growing up. So, I don't know, I just miss him. Sorry to bring you down right at the start, man. But.
No, I'm just crying a little bit. Nothing has really... It's felt very off. And I don't know. This whole year has been kind of off, and then that was like the really shitty cherry on top.
It was like I was actually on vacation within like 3 days of coming up to being in your neck of the woods. I was going to try to surprise you since I hadn't heard from you. And then we were down visiting some family in Long Island, and we found out that one of my son's therapists had got COVID. So we tested, and sure enough, my son got COVID, my wife got COVID. So we ended up driving back down to Florida to try not to infect the rest of our family. I got COVID on the drive, and then like literally the day after I got back, Eric called me up in the morning. I was sick as shit, and he's like, "Yeah, Russ just passed." I was like, "What the fuck?"
So basically how it went for me was through June and July, my mom had been in the hospital 4 times, and I was at her place. She'd just gone in for the 4th time, and at 11:03 at night, I get a phone call, wakes me up. I'm like, I'm thinking it's my mom dead. Like, I'm not to be morbid, but, 4 times in 2 months. And I see it's Eric. I'm like, he never calls me. So I'm thinking, like, did he get drunk and, like, pocket dial me? And then I heard, like, his voice on my voicemail. I'm like, oh, God. Like, I couldn't figure out, like, only thing I could think of was Sheila, right? Mm-hmm. And so I immediately called him back. And, gosh, you probably could have given me 100 guesses, and I don't think I would have guessed right.
And the way it happened, too, I mean, what a fucking weird world. But I will say this, Kent, I didn't get it. I was obviously down here. I didn't get a chance to go to the service or anything, but I did pour out one for Russ's mom while I was telling my friends about the, what had happened that week. So,
yeah, like, it was, I'll say this. So Eric and I both spoke at the funeral. The priest did the priest thing, and I always think that's awkward because usually the priest don't know the person that's deceased, but whatever, he did his best. Eric did a really good job, and it was, like, I was told, like, now they're going to, like, invite anybody else that wants to come up and talk, so I'm just sitting there waiting, and, like, the seating is so weird. It was like an L shape, so you're at, like, the middle point, and, like, I'm kind of looking around to see if anybody's coming up, and the priest comes up and is like, well, nobody else. I'm like, oh, crap. So I get up, my pants start falling down as I'm trying to get past people, and I'm like, Like the night before, my dress shoes fell apart. I'm like, yeah, this is going super well, and it's funny because Eric's and my, I don't know, speech, eulogy, whatever the hell you want to call it, like, they kind of coincided really nicely without ever planning anything because I legit forgot my notes at home before I went there. So I just winged it, and it correlated really nicely. I was happy. I think Eric and I did a reasonable job in representing for us. And I even got to talk about Russell's mom in the eulogy. I mean, she was right there, and it was nice. I haven't seen her in so long, and it was nice to see her. And I mean, all jokes aside, really, I hadn't. She is a nice lady. It's just. Yeah. Mom jokes are mom jokes and whatever, but I I'm grateful for the fact that Russ and I was able to go down and visit Eric down in D.C. like back in March or April, whenever the hell it was. I mean, normally you're not grateful for going on like an 8-hour ride with somebody back and forth. In hindsight, I was. You know? Just, it was so, dude, that week I was just writing up a new script for Russ and I. Like, we'd been waiting and waiting to film something, and I was just working on it. I was like, well, that's horrible odds. So, yeah, but hopefully, I don't know. I'm just hopeful for Heather and the boys, and I got a lot of stuff to pass on to the boys, obviously. I got a ton of, I don't know. I just got a ton of stuff, really.
Yeah.
I have known Russ since 3rd grade. He is like my longest tenured friend, so to speak. When I first moved to Mayfield, he was like the first kid that invited me over to his house. All that stuff, so... Yeah, just very strange, very shitty, but hopefully, things improve, I guess, if they can. I don't know how to word that.
Here's to you, Russ. We'll be talking about boobies and dragons and rapers getting their dongs sliced off. So,
yeah, that's a good tribute right there. So
to segue, I don't know how Kent was feeling necessarily, but I gotta say that like my anticipation for this wasn't as high as I think like my wife's or several of my friends. I felt let down by the last season of Game of Thrones. I'm still waiting for the Winds of Winter to come out, which was supposed to come out, like 11 years ago. And needless to say, I wasn't super thrilled to see like a prequel series, where we already know how it ends. But I will say this: I watched the first episode and I was like, this is really good. Let's hope it stays that way, because I mean, Game of Thrones started out really super strong too, and went downhill after time. So
actually, that was going to be my first question. Actually, I had a couple of first questions, so to speak. My first. I felt trepidation is my best word I can use to describe going into this, because of how the final season went out and because we're getting the prequel. So my first question to you is, would you have preferred a prequel or would you have preferred something after the events of Game of Thrones?
See, I don't know. Like, I'm kind of excited about like what they're talking about doing with like the Jon Snow show.
There's a Jon Snow show?
They're talking about doing one with him as a sequel about what he does with the wildlings after he goes north of the wall after the end of Game of Thrones.
I'd buy that for $1.
Yeah, so I mean, I'd be interested in that. I mean, some of the ones that they're talking about doing, like the one sailing princess that Arya was super excited about, I think Nymeria.
Oh yeah,
they're talking about doing one about another show about like all of her voyages, so like a female Game of Thrones Sinbad kind of show. That would be fucking cool.
I hope that they don't go the Walking Dead route, just because Walking Dead is now officially expanded its universe to, I don't know if it's like 6 different series at this point. At some point you kind of gotta...
I mean, the other thing too is I would have been completely happy if they didn't do anything else with it. I mean, Game of Thrones got everybody into it because it was based on A Song of Ice and Fire. The only books out there. Oh, they're doing. I don't know if you've read the Duncan Egg books.
I haven't read anything, so. No.
Okay, so they're about like Daenerys' grandfather when he basically gets like disowned for a while, and he has to hide and travel around as a commoner, and he's going around with a hedge knight who's like teaching him, like morality while he's doing it. So they're talking about. I mean, they're talking about doing like 5 or 6 different series, and maybe kind of like Lord of the Rings. This is something that you did the one successful thing, you just let it die. You don't need to do the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe of Game of Thrones.
But aren't they doing Lord of the Rings on Amazon now?
Yeah, let's not even go into that. But yeah, exactly that kind of thing. You know what I mean?
I guess my follow-up question to that question is, if they had to do the prequel, was Targaryens the most obvious and or most interesting choice?
I think if you want something that's going to be similar enough to get everybody hyped, then yes. Because, I mean, think about what we get in episode 1. Politics, sex, violence, dragons. We're not having to worry about, so all of the special effects budget can go for the dragons. We don't have to worry about, like, zombies and White Walkers and all of that shit.
Not yet, at least.
We can, well, not at all. I mean, because they would have had to have gone back thousands of years to hit that stuff.
Oh, okay.
And because it's during this particular time period, we're probably never going to go over to Essos, so we're not going to have to worry about, like, filming in Bravos or with the Dothraki or Marine or any of those places. So we can cut down on our locations, which is probably why they went with, for the most part, better-known actors in this than they did in Game of Thrones to start. Like, thinking back on it, I mean, the three who had, at least moderate, Sean Bean was pretty well known, same with Lena Headey, and I forgot what the guy's name was who played Robert, but he was, like, basically it, and everybody else in the show was, like, a relative newcomer. Here we have not necessarily huge names, but, Patty Considine, Matt Smith, Rhys Ifans, Grant McTavish, Olivia Cook, so, I mean, you're not talking about, like, A-listers, but definitely a lot more people who are going to be making more money than, like, Kit Harington is on episode 1 of Game of Thrones.
I don't know who any of these people are, looking at them by name, so I've, like, had to click on them individually, and, like, some of them I recognize from one thing or something, but by and large, for me, these are all mostly, like, new faces, which I'm okay with. Because realistically, if you think about it, Sean Bean's gone after season 1, Baratheon's gone after season 1, and Lena, the only thing she hadn't done The Purge yet, had she?
Yeah, she had done The Purge. She had done, Brothers Grimm, Dread. Maybe not all of that, but I mean, Sarah Connor Chronicles. Sarah Connor Chronicles.
Okay, so I really only knew her from one thing. So for me, like, once again, most people are unknown, which I'm cool with, quite frankly. A couple people did look familiar, but I haven't clicked on every single person.
The guy who played Otto Hightower, Rhys Ifans. He's been in a shit ton of stuff, but they did enough with the way they had the beard change his jaw shape that I didn't even recognize him, although I've seen him in shit with a beard on before. So yeah, so they did a good job of like burying him in the character.
Now, I personally believe they just went Targaryen for the dragons.
That too.
I think that's how you get the women. You say, all right, we got guys no matter what, because we're going to do Game of Thrones. There's going to be lots of tits and ass. We're going to have lots of violence. How do we bring in the women? Somebody raises their hand in the back row, says dragons. They're like, perfect. There we go. Because every woman that I've ever talked to about Game of Thrones, they love the dragons.
Well, I think they like the men's butts too, but probably some of the ladies' butts. And then there are the butts like Kit Harington's butt that I couldn't tell was a guy's butt until they turned around in that one scene in that last season.
Yeah, that was a moment.
Hey, I'll admit to
that is a moment. That season brought a lot of oddities.
All right, so one of the things I noticed, and we'll have to see, when episode 2 comes out, but they didn't do the intro or a intro like they did with Game of
music?
Thrones. Well, music
and
the map was. I mean, when you think about like that intro is fucking awesome. That was one of the things that like right away solidified my interest in the series. Between that the fucking awesome music and then the way that the model scaled around the map, everything moved, and then it would change as you went from location to location. I mean, that was really fucking cool. And all we got was basically just the dragon symbol on like a medallion or something. Almost minimalistic, like what The Witcher does.
Right. Yeah. I think we'll get something more in depth because they gave us that really interesting opening, which I enjoyed. Like the prologue, I guess you would call it, right?
Yeah, and it was interesting because it was definitely a way different tone to the way they started it than Game of Thrones went. Like I think it's interesting to look at the difference between them. Because for example, you have the beginning of this one with like the introduction and the giving the background of the history of where everything's coming from, and why the beginning of the series is set like it is. Relatively slow. It actually does a great job of giving you enough information to get you on board without having to like go into a super in-depth, like 10-minute long Lord of the Rings introduction. On the other hand, you have Game of Thrones where you don't meet any of the principal characters, and you start out with basically an entire family up in the north getting fucking whacked by zombies. Only you don't really know what's going on at the time. But that is basically the only violence and action you have in the first episode of Game of Thrones, up until Jaime throws Bran out the window. Whereas in this one, we have a slower paced introduction, but then we have a tournament, we have dudes getting murdered by the guard, we have dudes getting their heads caved in with axes, straight up seeing shit like that. The worst, or probably best filmed homemade cesarean I've ever fucking seen. Jesus Christ, that was uncomfortable. So, I mean, it's interesting, the differences and the contrast between the two shows.
And I think it's like there's so many similarities and there's so many contrasts. And the opening really, I think they did plenty to set it apart, which was very smart. One thing I noticed, they talked about 10 adult dragons. Are they saying that there's 10 adult dragons currently alive in this show?
Yes, and supposedly we're going to see 17 throughout the course of the series. And they said each one will have its own personality. However, by the end of this time period, they're down to 4. And,
Ooh.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not like it's looking good for the Targaryens. This is basically the beginning of their downfall.
Like, if you had to just guess, because obviously we don't even know how many seasons this will get, how the ratings will do. I assume the ratings will be just fine, considering it crashed the HBO Max app. Like, how many years do you think this is going to go in story?
The biggest thing is going to depend on where the time jump happened, like in this season, because we know there's one coming. Well, at least if you've been like following, the stuff that they've been putting out, looking at the cast list and stuff, you know there's a time jump coming.
I know that there's a younger version. I haven't really been paying attention to
these are the younger versions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well. Let me get into that when we get to the end. Let's circle back to that, because that way we can kind of follow along with what happened in the episode, and then I'll circle back to that. So we have the beginning where Viserys, however you pronounce it, ends up being chosen to be the heir, since he's the man. I mean, no big break there. I mean, we already knew this was going to happen.
Now, was the other one that, like, I know 14 applied, only 2 were considered. Was the lady that was considered, is she married to Corlys
Yes.
Valerian? Okay.
Yes.
He's
That's his
so
wife.
far my favorite guy so far, but I have a couple other people that are in the running for favorites, but
Yeah.
I love his hair.
Yeah, I liked him. And I mean, and I like the fact that she's not completely bitter, even though she got passed up.
Kind of accepting of the policy.
Yeah, I mean,
tradition.
she's bitter, but she's not like, she doesn't hate her family because of it.
Right.
So then we go to the present day. Rhaenyra is flying around on her dragon. She meets with her personal Kingsguard, who's played by Graham McTavish, who's fucking awesome in just about everything he does. He does a lot of video game voice work.
Yeah, I noticed that. I just like his last name, Westerling.
Yeah. So there she goes to see her mom, the Queen. The Queen's not feeling good. This is definitely a difficult birth compared to hers. They go to the council. The King's telling jokes. Corlys warns them of a leader of a group of pirates, and they're like, why should we be worried about these guys? Blah, blah, blah.
The Triarchy.
Yep. She goes and meets her uncle Daemon. He gives her a necklace and is super creepy when you consider how close the Targaryens typically are to each other.
Right. Now, I know this is kind of jumping the gun slightly, but just for clarification, whatever, it was something Black Daughter, something Daughter. Is that the name of his sword?
That's the name of his sword, yeah.
And he gave her the necklace that's made of Valyrian steel, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so he's like, we both have a piece of our homeland now.
Okay. Keep going on.
All right, so she's next scene hanging out with her buddy Alicent, who, and you know, like I'm not sure because I like I said, I told you I haven't read Fire and Blood, and I don't even know how in depth they get, but I kind of get like, even if it's not reciprocal, there's kind of like romantic little tinges there between the two of them.
Between Alicent and the
Rhaenyra. Yeah.
You know, I'm going to get to a point by like episode 3 where I'm just going to be like Alice, Rain, Val, or Vis, and Damon. Well, Damon, I'll.
And then we'll be like, which Vale, which
right,
Viz?
yeah,
which Ray? Because there's Rhaenyres and Rhaenyra.
Oh my gosh, yeah, like just typing Rain on my thing, I was like, is it A before E before A? And I think in my notes, there's probably like, it's almost probably half and half, really. So, thanks guys for picking good names. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So
now, how many? Because I believe we're getting. Oh no, we're getting to the wound first. What the hell is the wound on the king's back?
I don't know. I mean, I really don't like. We've already seen that the Iron Throne is definitely more active now. I mean, also bigger now than it was.
I thought it was bigger, and he cut himself. I'm like, dude, file that down or something. I don't know, but here is my one thought. Is there any chance that this could be something to do with dragons? Was it Dragon Scale that was?
Yeah, I don't know though. I mean, I don't. I know how he dies, but
you know how the king dies.
Yeah, but he could get Dragon Scale before that. But maybe it's not. I mean, maybe it's like he said. You know, he got it from the throne, but you know, it's the like what Tywin was talking about it back in and even Robert. You know, he's like, the throne's alive. You know, it pokes at you while you sit on it.
I mean, I wondered way back then, like, if there was ever potential to, like, poison a tip or something on the throne. I always thought that would have been an interesting mechanism, but
I mean, my first thought would have been like, is this like an STD? But he seems to be, a pretty decent guy compared to a lot of the nobles in Westeros.
I love his character.
Definitely seems like he loves his wife. So
yeah, like I went in expecting the worst of Viserys, and
the first Viserys, VIS we met, in Game of Thrones.
I might call him Viscera at some point too.
Was a fucking asshole. So I mean, you would expect that if they're naming him after somebody, he's going to be an asshole too.
He almost had like a Ron Perlman, presence to him at certain points, which I also appreciated. But I like the actor. I like the portrayal. I was really fond of it.
I was unsure how I was going to see him because I remember the first thing I saw him in was The World's End.
Oh yeah, with Simon.
Nick, Simon Pegg and Nick Frost.
There we go. Yeah.
And he was like the straight guy in the comedy, so it's hard to tell. And then the next thing I saw him in was The Girl with All the Gifts, and I was like, okay, he can do.
He was in that.
He can do a action or a more serious role. I don't know if he can has what it takes to be like main character in Anchor movie, but I was like, he's pretty good in that. So yeah, I really like his character in this too. I mean, I don't know if you want to. We'll just finish going through kind of the plot, and then we can talk about what we like and we don't like. But
I have one basic question without you potentially spoiling anything. I guess if you were to hypothesize based on knowing what's going to happen with him, is he at least making it past the first season? Like, is it going to be something that goes on a little bit longer, or you don't know? If you had to guess.
I think so. They've got him in all 10 episodes. So, I mean, but, I don't know if they listed, beforehand, like, Sean Bean being in all 10 episodes and then considered his head in, the last 2 as a...
Right, yeah. It's kind of misleading because, there's just a reference or a flashback and suddenly it's in 10,
But that's why I'm wondering, it's going to depend on how far into the future they jump.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. I think the next thing was with Emma, ammunition.
Emma, yeah. Emma.
How many? Was it 5? She had stillborns, miscarriages, etc., etc. Right?
Five failed pregnancies in 10 years.
Whew.
In addition to the daughter that they had, and I think, no, they didn't have it.
Was Rain the first? Was she the first pregnancy, or did they not really elaborate if the first one was the only successful one?
They didn't go into whether what the order was. So if she could have been the first one, she could have been the third one, but just the only one that survived.
I'm getting the feeling though she was the first only because it makes sense. First one, and then everything else subsequently goes awry.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
That seems to be the easiest. Occam's order.
Right.
So then we go to Daemon in front of the City Watch, and
who is Randall Barrett? Because I have subtitles going, and it's Randall Barrett. I'm like, oh, so Randall Barrett's the guy that I thought that Daemon is. So I'm calling him Randall. I'm like, wait, no, his name's Daemon. Who the hell's Randall Barrett? Do we know? Because his name appears on the screen.
Is he
He was a captain. Is he just the second in charge of the gold cloaks?
Maybe.
Okay.
So yeah, that's the beginning of the gold cloaks, and we can see that they really didn't get much better. All the way up into the point where they murked fucking Ned in season 1. So
that was such a good but brutal scene, and I'm just. What were they trying to really establish? That Daemon just doesn't care and he's half-assed in his job and just wants to take it out on people? Or, were they hanging out, at this place where there's just, nothing but, the worst people and they're just all these people are guilty, let's just kill them all?
I have a feeling it was kind of not a great scene because they didn't really give you I mean, I have a feeling we'll get more context later as we find out more about Damon, you know. So, I mean, it was hard to tell if they were supposed to be implying that these guys are just randomly grabbing people and, you know, saying, oh, he's guilty, fucking cut. Or, you know, if they actually knew and these were criminals and they were just being brutal with the criminals that they were picking up.
Right, yeah, I was a little confused by that. I mean, I loved the scene, but, 20 seconds of context would have helped.
The other thing that got me was some dude's like, raper! And then they cut off the guy's cock. And I'm like, you meant rapist!
Yeah, dude. I was like,
if we're gonna be using fake British accents, we should probably use at least British English.
Well, at first, so this was, I don't want to say my fear because I can't tell you one way or the other which is worse, but so since, you know, they said raper and then all of a sudden they're just showing his ass, I'm like, are they going to sodomize him? And then they cut off his wing and I'm just like...
Yeah, I was like, they're either going to castrate him or they're going to shove something up there. I don't want to see either.
Right, both were cringy.
Yeah, they definitely didn't hide from the gore in this episode.
No, I feel that they gave fans kind of if you were a fan of any, like, one aspect of Game of Thrones, they kind of threw something in there for you.
And I mean, and the only other thing I would have liked to go along with this scene, and it's because it's one of Daemon's refutations when he's talking to the tower or to the council the next day, but like, is he being honest when he's saying that, you know, crime is so bad that the commoners are afraid to walk through King's Landing, or is that just, you know, him trying to get around, you know, being a fucking psycho? And we really don't have the context to see, because all we've seen so far is, you know, just from a handful of people who are all, you know, if not royalty, then nobility.
Well, I wondered the same thing. It was like, was he trying to step up to make himself look good, or was he actually trying to do good in his own brutal way? And once again, we don't have the context yet, of course. Yeah. And hey, we got a new girl that I can't remember what her name was that Tyrion used to boink until she betrayed him, but
Shay,
there we go. Yeah, we got our new Shay. Miss Saria? Is that her name?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, I don't know if they ever actually say her name, but I mean, that's what it is in the credits. So,
right. She is attractive, so that's cool.
So, and it seems that, like, it's hard to...
Oh, Dark Sister is the sword.
Yes. There we go.
I said Black Sister, it's Dark Sister. My bad.
You're so racist.
I mean, can we just call Oscuro Sister, and then I could just go a little Espanol there, maybe? I don't know.
Ibanya. So, yeah, it seems like she's kind of manipulating him, almost like a... Not necessarily hardcore, but, you know, kind of like Ilaria Sand did with Pedro Pascal. I forgot what his name... Oberon Martell.
Yeah.
So then we go to the tournament. Queen's in labor.
This was my whole favorite scene. I don't know if this was everybody else's, but like the combination, the contrast between tournament and the labor scene, like
yeah, they did a good job with that.
Yeah,
I mean they did a good job with the tournament too, but I mean just the back and forth. I mean, so we've got the Baratheon in the show getting his ass kicked.
Yeah, how many name drops were in here? Because I'm taking notes. Like there was a Tarly, there was Baratheon, and Lord Macy. Some lady Lady Eleanor is hiding her pregnancy.
We get a Stark later on. Yeah, I mean, all of the people are still there. I mean,
it like, felt comfortable in some way, right?
Yeah.
Where is Old Town? Is Old Town something we knew from Game of Thrones or no?
Old Town is we only saw for a couple of episodes. That's where the head of the Maesters are. You know, so where Sam went when he met up with Jorah in, was it last season? Or the season before the last season, where he cured his
Oh,
his
okay.
scale rod or whatever it was called, and where he stole the books on the John's legitimacy.
I hope we get to see somebody take their horse to the Old Town Road. Yeah, I've been waiting on that one.
Lil Nas X. So yeah, I mean that's where the I think it was called the Citadel. I don't remember, but where they all those guys get trained.
So, what's up with asking like the girls for their favor? Like, I mean, it's what is the point of asking the girl for their favor?
Well, it's kind of like I'm doing this in
Symbolic?
your honor, so you know, you remember like A Knight's Tale with Heath Ledger?
Oh gosh, yeah, it's a while ago, but
Yeah, so like he would ask Rosalind for her favor, and then she would dance with him afterwards.
okay, so it's kind of like symbolic, and if you do good, maybe she'll give you something nice later on, like a dance.
Yeah,
Okay.
you know, like kind of a way, maybe leading into courtship a little bit. Maybe, I mean, depending upon who it was, like Loris probably when he was younger, before they were forcing him to marry, Cersei, whoever, probably would have been like asking his sister, just because,
Right.
for appearances, kind of shit.
Do we know any background on this Sir Kristen Cole? I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right.
I know a little bit, but it's more foreground, stuff coming up than background.
Like, I mean, it seems like he's going to be a player.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it was, I don't know, it's just really fun. I don't know, the best way I can say it. I love the fact, like, the fight, like, the big hand-to-hand fight with, well, not hand-to-hand, but sword to, I don't know, mace or whatever the hell that is.
Morningstar? Or
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. I enjoyed everything about this. Like, all the violence. It was just such a sharp contrast to the C-section, and like you're feeling bad for her.
Not only that, but they show, like, just think about like the amount of character growth that they well, not even growth, but just characterization they show between like Daemon and Hightower in this. You can tell that they don't like each other. So Daemon picks Hightower's son, cheats, and hurts and injures him, and then goes to Hightower's daughter and asks for her favor for the rest of the, just as in ways to piss this guy off over the course of the tournament.
It's the only time in my whole thing of notes where I wrote "ha ha" was at that exact moment, because it made me laugh. It really did. I was like, "Oh, that's such a good dick move." Yeah, gotta appreciate it.
And I mean, the fact that Kristen Cole is Dornish, and I think this is like Dorne is part. Dorne might not actually be part of the Seven Kingdoms at this point. I don't remember.
Okay. Yeah, I was kind of curious how Dorne played into anything yet, but once again, being the first episode, it's kind of
So I mean, yeah, the C-section was probably one of the hardest things to I've seen have to watch on a TV show. It's not super graphic, but I mean it's graphic enough. But it's like this shit leading up to it, like, hey, I love you, everything's gonna be all right. All right, tie her down and fucking cut the baby out.
Yeah, like he played that, and she's just like, okay, and then all of a sudden she's getting pulled down, like, oh, okay, and. I just love, what was the guy's name? Melos? He's like, well, we do know of a technique that we learned in the Citadel. It was like, all right, cool. Although, I kind of liked Emma. I mean, she was inevitable to die. It felt right from the get-go, but still, I kind of liked her character.
So we go from the son is born, but the queen is dead. He names the infant Balon, and then we don't actually see this, But the next scene is a funeral, and we find out that the son died as well because there's a small little baby pyre next to the queen's pyre. And we get a nice little scene between Rhaenyra and Daemon for a moment, where we see that he's not a complete asshole. And then we get Dracarys as her dragon. Yep.
I put 3 exclamation points after Dracarys. Yeah, one thing I really like is I'm sure we're going to see this throughout a good chunk of the series, I would guess, is like the relationship, the dichotomy between Rhaen and Daemon, because it's not so cut and dry between those two.
I like the fact that she's willing to talk shit to him, too.
Right, yeah. I really like their scenes together. They were really good. I'm hoping for... Obviously, we'll probably get plenty more eventually, but I like that.
So we then go to the council meeting again. Daemon's not there this time. They're trying to get Viserys to name a succession plan. They want him to choose between his brother and his daughter, and he refuses to make a choice. Things are going back and forth, like Corlys first is going to back Daemon, but then since everybody's refusing him, he's like, oh, we could go for my wife, and somebody's like, oh, see how fucking much you trade around on your, first you're going to Daemon, but now that he's gone, you're going to go back up your wife, so it's not a very happy council. It reminds me more of like a Lannister council than like a Baratheon one.
All we were missing was Littlefinger, just kind of like sitting in the background, just with his hands in his lap, just kind of observing. I don't know. That's all I imagined. I enjoyed it. I also like how somehow they have like secret little fences that people can just spy on this super important council session, so to speak.
Yep. Yeah.
You guys did
awesome.
A bad job.
So then we go to Hightower talking to his daughter, Alicent, and he's like, hey, why don't you go dress up like your mom and go seduce the king?
That was probably the creepiest scene, and I applauded it wholeheartedly. It's just like, in his chambers, wear one of your mom's dresses. Like, all right, yeah. Is he? What kind of play is he making though with that? Is he trying to get the king interested in Alicent?
Well, we'll get there in a second.
Okay.
So, at least at this point, Viserys is, oh, well, thank you, and he's not a creeper at this point, and he just keeps playing with his model of King's Landing. We go to Daemon at an orgy where he's just watching and drinking and not actually fucking this time. He gets himself in trouble by calling Balon the heir for a day, which Hightower, of course, hears about and lets Viserys know. So Viserys calls Daemon to the throne room. He's pissed off. Daemon gets pissed off about not being the hand. He hates Hightower. He tells Viserys that he's weak and that Daemon's the only one who can protect him from himself. So he gets ordered to go back to Runestone and see you later.
Two high points here for me was, I think, the first uttering of the word cunt. So,
yep.
Props, remembering my boy the Hound. And secondly, a term I've never heard, lick spittles.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It really is. I had to write that one down. I'm like, that one's really, yeah. Yeah.
So then we go to Viserys' meeting with Rhaenyra in the Dragon Room. He apologizes for being, misogynist, basically, or a man, and says she will be a great queen, and he's sorry that he didn't prepare her more. He explains to her where the whole Song of Ice and Fire came from, about the dream that Aegon the Conqueror had, which is why he decided he had to conquer the Seven Kingdoms in order to be able to fight back against, so foreshadowing for Daenerys and Jon. The council swear allegiance to the princess. And he flies away, and that's basically where it ends.
Yeah, he's going to the Vale. Yo, there was one lady that had a striking resemblance to Catelyn Stark, and I don't remember who it was that I saw, but I was like, oh wow, she, like, in the face, just really looked like Catelyn. But, yeah, I mean, that whole... I liked his whole story about Aegon, the dream, and, you know, they got the Song of Fire and Ice reference going. There was a lot of cool things going on. Now we won't see any aspect of the night, like the White Walkers or anything. We won't see any of that in this series, right? Like none of that.
Right.
Okay. Now, does the Third Eye Raven still? Would he be relevant in this?
No, not at all.
No. Okay. What about the Children of the Forest? Do they exist?
Possibly. I mean, they exist, obviously. But, yeah, like, as you can see, they're still worshiping the old gods and the new together.
Right.
Now. So, they had the werewood right up in the middle of the princess's garden. So, they would have been more likely to see a Children of the Forest, like, back then, before all the new gods started cutting down the werewoods and kicking them out of their forests and shit.
Makes sense. Yeah. I assume you watched the preview for the quote-unquote rest of the season, right?
I watched the trailers before it came out, but no, I didn't watch the preview for the rest of the season.
I want to make three things. I want to state three things. Mm-hmm. One, they referenced the prince that was promised, and now this is probably because I blacked out a good portion of that final season. Did they ever say who Azor Ahai was in Game of Thrones?
I think it ends up...
Was it Bran? Arya? Jon?
I think it was supposed to be Jon. And then maybe Jon and Dan. I don't fucking know. I don't think they knew.
I feel like they kind of didn't
Arya?
That one. Yeah. But they definitely referenced the prince that was promised in the preview moving forward. So I was like, all right, cool. I'm happy because Azor Ahai was probably like one of my favorite things to talk about. Another thing, and you probably have some more knowledge than I do about this. I don't know. I get the feeling that Alicent's going to be a heel more than a face in this moving forward. Like,
all right. So the basic premise going forward and why this becomes a war is Alicent marries Viserys.
Right.
And like whenever years later, 18 years later, whatever, they have a son. And he wants to keep it with Rhaenyra as his heir. And Alicent, and however Kristen Cole works in, I don't know if he's like the Lancelot to this Arthur Guinevere kind of thing, or if he's just a retainer or a friend or whatever. They talk her son, Aegon, into rebelling against his sister, Rhaenyra. So that's where the war portion comes in between and then, like, they kill Rhaenys, they end up killing Rhaenyra. He becomes like Aegon the Fourth, but he's like the worst the worst Targaryen king, and ends up being deposed within like a year by his own son. So
very nice.
So I mean, that's like, I don't know. If we get a time jump to where the kid's only like 2, then it could be, like 4 or 5. 6, but if we get a time jump to like where the son is already like 16, then less seasons. I don't know. But I mean, they've already told us who the adult Rhaenyra and the adult Alicents are. So,
if you had to speculate, or maybe you just know the answer to this, is Daemon going to be a long-term player in this, or is he kind of just going to serve until like the time jump to be like a thorn in the side, or is he going to be waiting?
I don't know. I don't know enough to like, I don't know if, like, for example, he kills his wife and then tries to hook up with his niece, and
that's the hope of the dream, right? Is
on her side, during this, or if, like, by the point that shit happens, he's already dead, So.
He reminds me a little bit of like Michael Rooker in the best way possible. So I'm a big fan of him. But yeah, like in my mind as I'm watching it, because once again I didn't know there was going to be a time jump, so now I have to reconfigure everything I just thought about. But in my mind, I'm like, oh, this guy's going to be a really good villain for at least one season, maybe longer. But
I was watching somebody do the review, and they're like, Damon's such a complete asshole, so of course he's going to end up being like Jamie and end up being everybody's favorite character.
Right? Yeah, like. Why not? Because Jamie couldn't have been more despicable in season 1, and yeah. Do you feel that they made this its own story enough to separate itself from Game of Thrones, or do you think that was never even the idea to do that in the first?
I don't think it was never even the idea, because I mean, like. It's going to be impossible with all the families still. I mean, it's the same families. So, I mean, you'll have different people, but I mean, there's going to be a Lannister coming in like next episode or the episode after that. I mean, it's just, the history is too intertwined in something like this.
Do we know anything more about Westerling as far as... Do we know anything about his history? What?
I don't.
No. Okay. No. I'll assume the same goes for Beesbury and Lord Strong.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like, I didn't do much studying for this at all. I read one of the blogs I follow. Like, the guy read Fire and Blood, and he went through and he listed like, okay, this is the ranking of the best to worst of the Targaryen monarchs.
Mad King was number 1 on best, right?
No, he was worst. And only above him was this next Aegon coming up.
All right. I'm excited about that. This exceeded my expectations because I had to push myself to watch this, even though I've been kind of excited. Deep down inside, I'm really braced myself to be disappointed.
Yeah.
And this thing's going to fool me. At some point or another, I'm going to be very disappointed, and I'm going to go back to this podcast and be like, remember when I told you I was going to be disappointed? Yep, here it is. It's going to happen, but I may as well enjoy the ride while I can.
Yes. I agree.
Yeah, I don't know. All in all, I thought it was a really good first episode, especially compared to other spin-offs. Like, I don't know, I'll use Fear the Walking Dead for an example. The first episode sucked comparatively. So this, I don't know, this just felt right. The look felt right. Everything kind of looked right for me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, they did a good job. I mean, like I said, a lot of it's going to come down to just, can the writing keep up with it?
Yeah, I mean, and I guess a lot of it comes down to how they handle the time jump, since that's an inevitable thing, apparently, that I wish I would have known about.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, that's fine, because I probably would have wrote the blog asking dumb questions that you probably would have just responded, "Kat, there's a time jump, you idiot." And I've been like,
I would have waited until
I mean, like, it reminds me of the damn squid.
Ask me again next week. Ask me again next week.
It reminds me of like the squids in Watchmen, where like you and Jim like fully aware of this whole squid thing, and I'm just like, what the fuck's this squid shit going on? So yeah, sometimes it's fun to be oblivious, and in this case, like I like being oblivious. Simultaneously, I do want to inform myself a little bit. I just don't want to know everything. That's one thing I mean,
I'm not. This is the extent of my knowledge. Everything that I know about this coming into it has just been laid out, so I have no more forewarning over what's going to happen.
I mean, you've permanently scared Raylene from ever being on this podcast because of your vast knowledge of Game of Thrones, to the point where, we just sit there.
I just talk a lot like I know what I'm talking about, and sometimes that's correct.
That's how I feel about wrestling. I mean, most of the time it's just bullshit, but, if it sounds good, and whatever. So, I'm trying to think of anything else. I only had a few questions really written down, and Now, you don't know... I guess, during the time jump, are we saying that dragons are going to die, or we don't know when the dragons die?
I'm assuming they start dying once the Targaryens go to war with each other.
Okay. I also enjoyed that apparently riding a dragon presents a certain stench on you.
Yes, I did not know that.
I kind of thought that would have been I wouldn't have thought there would have been that much of a stench from a dragon, but...
Well, I mean, think about lizards, I don't know if you've ever had, an iguana cage, but...
I've never ridden on a iguana.
Well, I mean, not necessarily riding on it, but even just having one, if you don't clean them out regularly, they start to smell.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've just never had one, so... Okay.
Yeah, maybe Danny was just I'm going to scrub the shit out of you guys so I don't stink.
I can see that.
How else am I going to be able to seduce my nephew if I smell like dragon?
Gosh. We need more incest in this by
I bet we'll get it.
that is the hope in that's what people are really missing from this one, but we'll get it.
I'm sure. That's exactly. If I went down to the reviews, that would be exact. Needs more incest.
Yeah. Now, do you see anybody in the council, I don't know what the hell the name of it is, whatever, the council that's going to be the manipulator, the little finger?
I don't know if we're necessarily going to see a manipulator with these guys, but, we're already kind of seeing it with Hightower. Sending his daughter, the queen isn't even in the fucking ground, a couple hours, and he's sending his daughter to go seduce the king.
I thoroughly enjoyed the fact that there's all right, your baby and wife just died, but we really gotta talk about, who's gonna succeed you right now. No time for mourning. We need to have this conversation right now. And we're gonna argue about it. I love that was... When they've had that conversation before the baby given Emma's history, you're already kind of half expecting that baby not to live, so shouldn't that conversation have already happened?
I would have imagined they would have been yeah, let's have this conversation. He's no, I'm not going to have to worry about it. I'm going to have my fucking son. My fucking son's going to be my heir.
I had a dream that this baby has a cock, and we're good. Okay?
Yeah, not only does he have a cock, he was fucking... Dragons were bowing to him, and all the bells were tolling. It was fucking 4th of July in King's Landing. Everybody was happy.
Yeah. He has some good dreams.
Santa was giving out boobies and beer.
Ah, yes. All right. I guess to wrap this up, is there... Wow, I'm hearing some sirens going on. Something crazy's happening. Anyway, is there any one thing that you're looking forward to above and beyond anything else?
Yeah, I just hope it does well. Because we don't get a shit ton of fantasy stuff. And between Lord of the Rings and then Game of Thrones, we started getting more of it because of the success. So if this tanks after the way Game of Thrones ended, I think, and I have a feeling Wheel of Time is going to tank, and I have a feeling Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power is going to tank. I have a feeling that we'll stop seeing people being willing to invest in these types of shows.
What is Wheel of Time, and what channel is that on? I don't know anything about it.
It's on Prime. It's based on, basically if Lord of the Rings is the most popular series of fantasy books, then the Wheel of Time is the second most popular series of fantasy books. And they've done it horribly.
Fair enough. All right. See, this is how little I know about anything fantasy, although I am still rooting this on because I hate to see any one genre just die off. The more variety we have, the more everybody has something to watch and enjoy. So, for those reasons, I hope this is a success. I hope we get a good 5 years out of it because it's content. I like content.
Yeah. Well, there we go. Thank you guys for listening. We'll be back with a part B to just probably shoot some shit for a little bit. So stick around or come back. Thank you.